200 bucks. Sure does get you a lot these days. Hey everybody, welcome back again. I'm Dave from Chase's Summit. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Coros Pace 2. Future Dave here. I forgot to give you my full disclosure. This is not a sponsored video. Coros did send me this watch for the purpose of this review, but they have no say in what opinion I have or what I tell you in this video. The Pace 2 was announced last week. I got my hands on it early last week, so I was able to get a good amount of runs in and enough data to share my opinion with you now. The Pace 2 is the entry-level device for Coros. Comes in below the Vertix, Apex Pro, and Apex at just 200 bucks. And this replaces the original Pace that launched several years ago. However, they didn't change the price. I really like that. The old Pace was 200 bucks. The new Pace is 200 bucks. And spoiler, you get a lot for your money here. The Coros Pace 2 is targeted at runners primarily. It does other stuff as well, but really they had runners in mind when they designed this thing, except for trail runners. We'll talk about that in a second. And this thing offers a lot in terms of functionality and training tools for runners for just 200 bucks. And it competes with some much more expensive devices that are out on the market today. Let's get into the design of the Coros Pace 2. The old Pace came with a 4-button layout. The new Pace comes with a digital knob and a back button. This is the same approach they take with a lot of their watches, and I really like it. The digital knob is really responsive. It's easy to use. It's very smooth. The overall design of the Pace 2 is very minimalistic. It doesn't scream for attention. I like that. It comes in this like dark blue kind of charcoal color, and it also comes in a white flavor. I'm gonna imagine they're gonna roll out a whole bunch of colors for this thing. It also comes with a silicone band, but there is an option to get a nylon band with it. And then around the front of the display, there's a little Coros graphic etched into the glass. In terms of size and weight of the Coros Pace 2, you're looking at 36 grams with the silicone band and 29 grams with the nylon band. They're marketing this as the lightest GPS watch available on the market today. In terms of size, it's 42 millimeters in diameter and about 13 millimeters thick, like 12.7 millimeters. And it feels quite small, but this is coming from a guy who wears pretty big watches on the regular. Overall though, very small, very light, you barely feel it on your wrist. I don't have any real complaints about the build quality on the Coros Pace 2. However, it does feel very plasticky. That is a word, right? It feels a little bit like I put one of my kids' toys on or something. It's not really a negative because it has been holding up. It doesn't even have a scratch on it, but it feels just kind of cheap. And they wouldn't be able to make it so light and also make it feel premium at the same time, if that makes any sense. The only thing I am a little concerned about is the digital knob itself. It does feel extremely plasticky, and I'm afraid that if I was to bash this or kind of twist it the wrong way, that I'd be able to actually snap this off. I mean, I don't know if you can or not. It just feels a little bit flimsy, if that makes any sense. Only time will tell. The Coros Pace 2 is waterproof down to 5 atmospheres or 50 meters, so it's okay for pool swimming, showering, that sort of thing, but you don't want to go diving with this thing. Around the back of the watch, we've got our heart rate sensor and the proprietary Coros charger, which is the same as the Apex Pro, and the Vertix. The display is Gorilla Glass, so it is scratch resistant, just like any cell phone is, but it is certainly not scratch proof, so you're going to be kind of careful with it. I mean, that's not surprising here. This is a $200 watch. I'm not expecting sapphire, so Gorilla Glass is totally acceptable. The display itself is 240 by 240 pixels. It is a transflective memory pixel display, and it is color. It's not just black and white. It actually looks pretty good. It looks very similar to the Coros Apex, the Apex Pro. I'm out here on my trail run after filming this review, and I think I forgot to mention that you can have up to 6 data fields per page on the Pace 2, which is a great feature to have. I also want to mention that this display is actually super visible. The only issue I have with it is the backlight is very washed out, and I found this to be the case with all of my Coros devices. It's just a very bluish hue. It doesn't have a lot of contrast. It is functional. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just really washed out compared to my other devices from Polar or Garmin. As far as sensors go, we've got a barometric altimeter on board, which is great for this price point, an accelerometer, a gyroscope, a compass, the heart rate sensor on the back, and of course Bluetooth to pair it with your phone. So that's a lot of sensors for something in this price point. Typically anything under 200 or around 200 bucks omits the altimeter altogether and just uses that GPS data for elevation. Coros is toting that they've put a much faster processor in the Pace 2 compared to the Pace 1, and I've noticed it. It's very snappy, it's very responsive. Walking through the user interface, there's no lag, there's no delay. The watch face of the Coros Pace 2 can be customized from a bunch of pre-configured watch faces that they have in the Coros app on your phone. There's a lot to choose from, and I think most people can find something they'll be happy with. When you scroll up or down from the watch face, you start to scroll through the widget loop. You've got things like a heart rate graph graph from the past 6 hours, temperature data, elevation data, a widget that displays your steps for the day and stairs climbed and all that stuff, a widget for your phone's notifications displaying text messages or whatever, and then you've got a sunrise and sunset widget that they actually added recently and I really like. Something I used a lot on my Garmin watch. Clicking the digital knob once will bring you into the activity selection menu where you can select which activity you want to pursue for the day. You can't add or remove activities to this menu. What they are is what you get out of the box. You can reorder them in the app, but you can't add to them. One thing I don't like about this is there's no trail running activity. My primary bread and butter here, I'm a trail runner, and they didn't include that on the Pace 2. They want to make you pay up for the Apex or the Apex Pro to get that trail run activity. Within each activity, you can fully customize all the data pages to your heart's content using the phone app. It's really easy to use. You can swipe through the pages, select what data field you want to change, select what you want to see. Below all of your activities, you also have a selection for training and training plans. Training is to set up a small training plan for intervals or strength training, and then training plans is a new feature that was rolled out in the newest firmware from Coros to incorporate a calendar view of a training plan. So say you're training for a marathon or an ultra marathon or something, you can custom tailor a training plan to your needs. You can actually go through the app and manually select days. You can dial in how many miles you want to put out on a given day and what intensity you want to go out with. I like the training plan view. It is a little bit complicated to get set up at first because you got to like manually select each day. The Coros Pace 2 is also compatible with the new strength training feature from Coros, which is really cool. I actually have a whole video about that you can go check out. In essence, there's a whole bunch of workouts you can do in the app in the phone, and you can program those to be synced up with your watch to tell you what to do, how many reps you're going to do. There's also a heat map of your body to tell you what muscles you've been working recently. Go check out the other video I made on this. I'll link it up here somewhere if you're interested in that. Within the Coros Android and iOS app is where you can get a breakdown of your summary of your day. On the top, you'll see your active calories burned, active energy, exercise time, steps, heart rate data, sleep from the night before, your training load, your VO2 max, your fitness index, your resting heart rate, and your threshold pace. And all of these advanced training metrics you should take with a grain of salt. For me personally, they're not that accurate. I've never been tested in a lab, but I know for sure my VO2 max is higher than the 42 it was telling me last week. But it is probably okay to use as a ballpark for a general idea of your fitness. I mean, that goes for Garmin and Polar too. They're all kind of guessing here. Unless you go to a lab, you're not getting perfect data. On the next tab, you have your all workout screen that shows a past history of all of your runs, and you can dive into any run to get the nitty gritty on all of your data, including that new power metric, which shows up as a graph. The next tab is your personal profile, where you can set up training plans like I was talking about before. And the final page within the Coros app is where you can set up the watch itself for your activity pages, change the data fields, update the firmware. All of that stuff is located here in this last menu. The Coros Pace 2 is also one of the first watches to include full Stryd support out of the box, which is really awesome stuff. For instance, my Garmin Forerunner 945 here, you can use the Stryd Pod with it, but you got to download the Stryd app first, so there's complexity there, and it's not full native support, so you don't get all of the metrics that you get from the Stryd Pod. Now on the Coros Pace 2, it's baked right into the firmware out of the box. You've got full Stryd support, all of the data, all of the metrics gets baked into the FIP file without any additional steps. You just pair the Stryd Pod as if it was any other Bluetooth or ANT+ accessory. That's really nice to see. I hope other manufacturers are watching this because I think a lot of people who use Stryd and are hardcore runners are going to be gravitated towards Coros devices for this feature alone. Another exciting feature about the Coros Pace 2 is that it has wrist-based running power built right into the watch. You don't need a Stryd sensor to get that running power metric. It does it based on the algorithms using the altimeter and the GPS data right from the watch. However, the Stryd is supposed to be much more accurate. All right, so here's an example from one of my activities last week. We've got the Polar Grit X in green, the Coros Pace 2 in red, and the Stryd Pod in blue. And as you can see, they're all trending in a similar direction here. Something to note about running power is that there's no standard for it yet. Like, all these companies do it a little bit differently, so keep that in mind while we look at this data. I will say that the Stryd Pod is kind of the gold standard here because it delivers consistent results almost every time. So if we look at the data here, we see that the Polar Grit X actually follows the trend line of the Stryd Pod a little bit closer than the Coros watch. However, they're both doing a pretty good job. And the important thing is that the trend line matches the Stryd Pod more so than the numbers. So we can see here, for instance, that the Grit X is looking at 364 watts, while the Stryd Pod is at 262 watts, while the Pace 2 is down in 212 watts. But their trend lines all look pretty similar. However, there is one use case I keep in mind while I'm looking at this data. For instance, if you're a Stryd user and you went on vacation and maybe you forgot your pod or you didn't want to run with it that day, having your watch mimic closer to what the Stryd Pod would do would be a pretty valuable thing. And in in that case, the Coros kind of has the advantage here. Now we're going to take a look at the heart rate data coming out of the Pace 2 from the wrist-based heart rate sensor compared to my Polar H9 chest strap and also my Garmin 945. Here you see the Coros Pace 2 in purple, the Polar H9 chest strap in red, and my Garmin 945 in blue. And right off the bat, you see some deviations here. So let's zoom in a little bit. Yeah, so you can see that the Coros Pace 2 is actually sticking more in line with the Polar H9 chest strap, while my Garmin 945 is struggling to catch up a little bit at the beginning here. I've seen this with a lot of my Garmin watches. They always have this kind of delay at the beginning of a run. Let's go further down and take another look at some more sample data here. Here we see a deviation again of the Garmin 945 reporting a little bit higher than the Coros Pace 2. And the Pace 2 is doing a pretty good job here. It's kind of sticking to the trend line of the Polar H9 chest strap, and that's what's important here. Overall, I'd say the Coros Pace 2 is doing a pretty decent job with the onboard wrist-based heart rate sensor, but it's still not perfect. If you want perfect data, you got to use that chest strap or an arm strap or something like that. Speaking of that, the Coros Pace 2 is fully capable of pairing with any Bluetooth or ANT+ sensor. All right, so here's a big one, a really tricky one, GPS accuracy. There's two sides to this. There's road running and then there's trail running. I went on several road runs with the Coros Pace 2 and I had no issues with GPS accuracy. It wasn't perfect, but it did a decent enough job for what I was trying to do. For instance, here we're looking at a road run around town, pretty casual run. And here you see the Coros Pace 2 in blue, the Garmin Forerunner 945 in red, and my phone is actually the one in orange. And as you can see, for the most part, they're all doing a decent job. However, there are some issues in the Coros Pace 2's data. It kind of wanders off track. It drifts a little bit more than the other two devices, especially here. You can see this kind of juts out into space here. Let me remind you, I did update the satellite data within the phone app, and I let the watch acquire a GPS fix before starting the activity. Still, I'm getting some erroneous data here in the road running. Grand scheme though, the road running data isn't that bad. It's usable, it's passable, but it's not amazing. However, when we look at trail running, it's a whole different story. The Coros Pace 2 did a terrible job at tracking my trail run yesterday. I went out for a 10-mile trail run out back, 5 miles out, 5 miles back, so the tracks should be right on top of each other. There was heavy tree cover. I'm here on the East Coast. Our single tracks are covered by trees for the most part, even on mountaintops, so not a great view of the sky. However, my Garmin Forerunner 945 did a pretty decent job at tracking this run. So here, the Coros Pace 2 is orange, and the Garmin 945 is blue. And as I pan across here, we can see that the Coros Pace 2 is all over the place. It's wandering left and right, and there's some real particular areas where it gets way off track. Here you can see that the Garmin Forerunner 945 is almost right on top of itself, so it's doing a great job at GPS tracking here, but that Coros Pace 2 in orange is just way off track, and there's even a straight line trying to get it back on track when that data kicked back in. Now, while I was out running, I did notice the watch actually alerted me a couple of times that I had a weak GPS signal, and then it would say signal acquired, and then weak GPS and signal acquired, and it kept flip-flopping back and forth. Now, I did reach out to Coros yesterday, and I sent them this data, and I asked if I had a faulty device. Kind of hope it's faulty because I've seen other reviews, like DC Rainmaker posted one on his website where it has like perfect accuracy, and I'm just not seeing that here. I don't know if other reviewers took this watch out into the woods and under tree cover, and these are the results I'm getting. In conclusion, how do I feel about the Coros Pace 2? Well, it's kind of a mixed bag at this point. Without answers about the GPS performance, I'm not sure if I could fully endorse this thing. I'm hoping that Coros can help me out with that, and if they do, I will make sure to comment down below and pin it, so make sure you scroll down and check that out for updates. Another thing missing from this watch is navigation entirely. There's 0 navigation features on this watch. They do give you a compass that you can dive into and use that maybe with a paper map if you're really in a pinch, but you cannot follow a GPX file course on this watch. You cannot back to start on this watch. No navigation features whatsoever. There's no breadcrumb map, none of that stuff. So if you're looking for that, you're looking at the Apex Pro, the Vertix, or a Garmin watch. But I will say that the Coros Pace 2 has a ton of potential. It's got a ton of features on paper. That running power from the wrist itself and full Stryd support is really amazing at a $200 price point. I think veteran runners and new runners alike would find a lot of value with this watch as long as it performs as expected. It's good to see a company like Coros listen to their customers and deliver something like this that ticks almost all of the boxes. My only complaint so far is the lack of trail running activity, and the GPS data I'm getting out of this thing under tree cover just doesn't make sense at all. So I'm hoping to get some answers on that front, but until then, my opinion on this is kind of of all over the place. Alright, I think that's all I've got for today. If you found this video helpful or at least entertaining, make sure you give me a thumbs up down below and consider hitting that subscribe button so you don't miss more videos like this in the future. If you're interested in picking up a Coros Pace 2, make sure you check the links in the description down below. They help support my channel and they cost you nothing. And if you are picking up a Coros Pace 2, let me know why in the comments down below. And if you're not, let me know what the Coros Pace is missing that you want to see. I think I'm done now. I'll see you next time.